Get excited. It's draft time, baby. Let's do it. What is up, Bengals fam? It's your boy Mike coming back at you. One last Who Daily before they make their pick at 5 tomorrow on the NFL draft. It's going to be Ja'Marr Chase. Just saying. Unless the Falcons take him or trade out and somebody else goes up to get him. But look, it's a good sign that you're seeing all these stories about people trying to trade up with Atlanta, specifically to get Ja'Marr Chase. That means we're on the right dude. That means everybody else sees he's a stud too. And it's not just the Bengals. You don't hear anybody talking about trading up to get Penei Sewell, do you? Me either. So what I wanted to do, we've talked enough about this draft. We've talked enough about the options at 5. We think we know who it's going to be. No need to keep talking about it, right? So what I wanted to do was look at, historically, the Bengals' number 5 or top 5 NFL draft picks. So anytime in the past that they've selected in the top 5, let's take a look at those. I believe there were 15 of them. Let me check. Let me count again. Sit here while I count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There are an Andy Dalton amount of picks that the Bengals have made in the top 5. Let's start with the earliest ones and come to the beginning, or to where we are today. 1968, number 2 overall, the Bengals took Bob Johnson, legendary center for the Bengals, played forever for them, and his number's retired. Number 54, his number's retired for the Bengals. That was a hit. I think they hit that pick. So moving on, very next year, 1969.
Nice.
And they had the number 5 pick, and they took the golden boy with the huge arm, Greg Cook, who was essentially Justin Herbert in 1969, right? Like, huge arm, just could make every throw, super athletic dude, and just couldn't stay healthy. Got a shoulder injury early on and just was never the same. Just some more of that Bengals bad luck that we're used to, right? What are you going to do? Next pick they had in the top 5 was in 1972, and they took Sherman White at number 2 overall. Sherman was a defensive end out of Cal. He he was not a bust, but at number 2 overall, you're looking at like your expectations are super high. So all the expectations for these guys are super high. So there are some on here, and you probably already know who they are that are considered busts, right? Nothing I can do about it, just how it goes. But in 1977, they had another top 5 pick. That was a number 3 overall pick. They took Eddie Edwards, another defensive end, this time out of Miami. Eddie Edwards had a really good career. In fact, I think he's part of his career, part of his career was played before they kept track of stats or sacks as an official stat. So Eddie Edwards is considered by most Bengals fans to be the sack leader in franchise history. However, we don't really know actually how many he officially has, right? So moving on to 1979, they had the number 3 pick again, and they took Jack Thompson, quarterback out of Washington State. I think Jack Thompson was on the 1981 team when they went to the Super Bowl. Sounds right. But yeah, not like a world beater type quarterback, but he was good. You move on to then 1988. So they went 8 years without a top 5 pick, and those were the years they were good. So in 1988, they had the number 5 overall pick, and they took Ricky Dixon. Ricky Dixon, in case you didn't know, he's a defensive back out of Oklahoma. And I don't know a whole lot about him. I could have done a whole lot more research on this, but dude, we're talking about ancient history here, right? 1988. I was born. I was 2 years old. Do the math. You can figure out how old I am. In 1993, the Bengals had their next top 5 pick, number 5 overall. They took John Copeland. John Copeland, I don't remember much. We haven't got into the players where I actively remember them, right? But he's a defensive end. I kind of I do remember him, but not a lot. John Copeland was a very serviceable defensive end, pretty good defensive end. And then you got one everyone's heard of, Big Daddy Dan Wilkinson. He was the number 1 overall pick in 1994, and for a defensive tackle to be taken at number 1 overall. I mean, the expectation, he never lived up to his expectations, but that's because the expectations were ridiculously high, crazy high. But he was a good player, you know. He was a force out there. So one cool thing I read about Dan Wilkinson is that he voluntarily gave up his starting spot for one game to the veteran Tim Crumry at the kind of end of his career, so that Tim could get a final start his last game as a Bengal, which is very cool. Cool dude. And then you've got 1995, the one everyone's heard of because it's considered probably the biggest bust in draft history. In 1995, at number 1 overall, the Bengals did something that is unthinkable today. Absolutely unthinkable. A year after drafting a defensive tackle, number 1 overall. Think about this. A defensive tackle. If somebody drafted... If they drafted a defensive tackle at 5 overall in today's NFL, dude, come on. It's just... But then the next year to follow it up by drafting a running back, number 1 overall. That's like 2 cardinal sins right there. There's just no world where that makes any sense, right? Like in today's NFL, if you don't need a quarterback and you're drafting at number 1 overall, trade back. Just trade back. It's a team that needs a quarterback is going to give you a ridiculous haul for that pick. Trade back and you could have still gotten probably ki-jana Carter trading back however far you wanted to trade back. But ki-jana Carter just never he got hurt early in his career. Early on, he had knee injuries and all kinds of stuff, and just was never the dominant running back that you would expect a number 1 overall pick to be. And he's considered a bust for that reason. So the next pick they went, the next top 5 pick they had was in the year 2000, and that was Peter Warwick at number 4 overall. Peter Warwick didn't have a career that justifies necessarily a number 4 overall pick, but he was really, really good. You expect like Julio Jones level of play. That's not really what you got, but Peter Warwick, really good kick returner, really good deep threat. I remember him catching the passes from Keely Smith and Jeff Blake, just burning down the field. Their next pick, that very next year, 2001, you guys see a trend. When they start picking in the top 5, it's usually a few years in a row because their team's garbage. But in 2001, a year after taking Peter Warwick at number 4, again picking at number 4, they took Justin Smith. Justin Smith, another one of these guys that is not like an all-pro level player, but he had a long, really productive career. You could argue probably his best years came with San Francisco. But if you look at his numbers, they're roughly the same with the Bengals. He just didn't get the fanfare because that team was like it was hot garbage. It was a dumpster fire. And when you're a really good player, and Bengals fans are all too familiar with this, you're a really good player playing for a bad team, nobody gives a shit. You don't get talked about on ESPN. You don't get selected to Pro Bowls. Nothing. You just kind of languish, and that's why when people say that nobody wants to play for the Bengals, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the Bengals' propensity to go 4 or 5 years being irrelevant, and that's 4 or 5 years if you're playing your the peak of your career for a team that is never playing in playoff games. Tough to make an argument, for your career being a really successful one. But we're not there anymore, right? We're coming off of, it's been a rough 5 years or so. But before that, it was 5 straight years of playoff appearances, right? And say what you will about A.J. Green and Andy Dalton and that whole crew, Geno Atkins. At the end of the day, they had 5 chances in the playoffs to go in and win games. You can blame it on Marvin Lewis and all these, but players are the ones on the field playing the game. At the end of the day, you got to be responsible for that. And they went there 5 straight years and didn't win a single game. That speaks for itself, right? Then 2003, obviously, they take the golden boy Carson Palmer. I was crazy pumped about this pick. Crazy pumped about it. Obviously not listed here. But hey, wait a minute. It's not 14 picks. It's 15 picks as they took Joe Burrow in the top 5. So Carson Palmer, obviously, you guys know his career, kind of left town on a bad note because he famously would rather retire than play another season with the Bengals, and he did. And the Bengals said, you know what, we're not trading you. or we're not going to release you, so you're just going to sit out a year. Both sides being really stubborn, and then eventually the Bengals ended up trading him and getting a really good haul for him, and rightfully so. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league at the time. He went on to have a really good career with the Cardinals. So, and a couple, I think he played for another team, I'm not sure, but and then you got obviously Mr. Adriel Jeremiah Green was taken 4th overall by the Bengals. So if you look at, and you guys, I don't need to go over what AJ Green's done. And if you want to know my feelings on AJ Green, go check out my video on the channel of when the Bengals cut AJ, or when the Bengals didn't cut. Did they cut him? When AJ Green left the squad this year, I posted a video about it. So, if you're looking here to say, really, there are only kind of two. If you're looking to compare this draft class, and say, well, the Bengals are going to sit there at 5 and they're going to take Ja'Marr Chase. Well, the only two guys you really have to compare and draft history for the Bengals as far as a top 5 wide receiver, AJ Green and Peter Warwick. I think Ja'Marr Chase has especially if he plays 10 plus years with Joe Burrow throwing him the football, you could be looking at the best wide receiver the Bengals have ever drafted, potentially, in Ja'Marr Chase. Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, they'll have something to say about that, but they didn't come out with the profile anywhere close to what Ja'Marr Chase or AJ Green or even Peter Warwick came out with. So it's going to be freaking awesome, guys. I'm going to be watching the draft tomorrow. I just want to do this quick video today. I don't want to beat you over the head with more draft material. You're getting that from all angles, but I wanted to show you guys kind of something cool, just historically, what have the Bengals done when they've had a top 5 pick? And I'll leave it with that. Thanks for coming to the channel. I've been Mike. This has been Who Daily. See ya.